Redditors who moved to a better country in search of better life, how did you make it? What helped you to make a first step? Better country is subjective, as many pointed out. That said, I moved from the USA to the Netherlands for grad school, and then to Canada to finish my PhD. It's pretty easy to do in the context of education as you have something clear to apply for, and in my field at least you get a stipend to live off of at the PhD level. As for what prompted it, well, I always liked to travel, so decided living abroad for a few years would be awesome because it would be like traveling all the time. Answer: in reality, yes and no, plus honestly the weekend trips and workshops were awesome. You could go to Paris for a weekend on the train for example, and I felt spoiled for having such choices. I also liked the Dutch to the point where I'm marrying one. Smile. Ultimately though, I just moved back to the USA because my grad school days are done and I got a job offer in the USA I couldn't turn down. It's also in the part of the USA I always wanted to live in, so pretty happy about it so far. Finally, if anyone else wants to get out, check out /r/IWantOut, which is an excellent sub for advice on moving to another country. Question for people who moved to a new country: how did you do it? What was the process? Just secure a job that will sponsor you and then find an apartment? Then go through all the immigration stuff along the way. How do you get a job, hell, even an interview, with a company that's 4,000 miles away? Moving across the pond is something that, while I haven't given it any real serious consideration, I've thought about and how great the experience may be. I just don't think it would be pragmatic unless it's easy to pull off. Easy, insofar as the process in of itself is just time consuming, certain steps need to be taken, paperwork needs to be done, etc. Instead of being inherently difficult. If you don't have a job for a week, you get deported, for example. I moved to my dad's home country out of sheer boredom and the fact I had the passport. I booked my tickets 8 months early, told my family a month later, and did it all on my own. I spent 3 months in hostels, moved in with strangers, worked my ass off. Got in and out of an abusive situation. Life's still shit, but after 2.5 years I'm back in university and I've traveled/will travel to nearly 15 countries by the end of this year. I'm seeing the world and rediscovering my heritage. So things have worked out. Moving to the UK was the best thing I ever did. My best advice: if you want to try, the worst that can happen is that you have to move home. If you don't try, you'll never know what could have been. Moved to Australia after high school. Currently pursuing bachelor's in nursing. Things have changed drastically, most of them in a good way. Wouldn't say I'm super happy, but I'm so fucking content with where my life is leading me. So folks, just take a leap of faith. Retired, didn't want to be in the US anymore, besides. Would not be able to live on my retirement income there. Moved to Central America where I have had a great life for almost 20 years. I made it by being patient, respectful, learning the language and wanting to live like a local instead of some old gringo shut up behind walls. Had a small farm and built a couple of cottages to rent to tourists. Lost my helper and had some health problems and sold that property, and now I rent a smallish house that is perfect for me. Several years ago, I became a citizen of my new country. Do you have any family still in the US? Did you ever travel back to the States? I'm in academia. Once you've done your PhD, you can't limit yourself to looking for jobs in your city, or even just in your country. I applied for 50 jobs and got one, in France, so here I am. Wow, and where have you lived before moving to France? What job were you looking for? I would love to read the success stories on this thread as I endeavor to take the opportunity to live overseas. It's daunting just thinking what could have happened when I made the decision. That's reason why I try to convince self to make the step forward. Hopefully, it turns out to be a great opportunity and life-changing moment. Donated my possessions to charity, quit my job, moved out of my flat, left the UK, took a one-way flight to Boston, spent 8 months traveling through the US, then from Mexico to Colombia by bus and boat. When I got to Medellin, I decided this is the place for me. I have been here for 2 years and 4 months now. Still very happy here. I moved to London, UK, first at 19 because I wanted to improve my English and study at a university there. Plus I have visited London a couple years before and absolutely loved it, so I was really keen to live there. After finishing my studies and then some, 7 years later I moved to Vienna, Austria, for better quality of life, and yet again for an opportunity to learn a new language. I have been in Vienna now for almost 2 months and I enjoy it tremendously. I suspect I'll live here for a good couple years, before moving one last time, back to my home country. But how did I do these moves? Well, lots of preparation, help from family, and unfortunately, money. It's not easy or cheap to successfully and seamlessly move to a new country. It is however something that people have always been doing, more and more so since late 90s, early noughties, so it's absolutely possible. I highly recommend trying it. It's a great way to learn about the world, and respect what you had at home and taken for granted. It all started in second year of university, at the study abroad fair. An older student I was acquainted with encouraged me to apply. So I did, and I was accepted to study in Belgium for a year. Best year of my life. I divide my life into before and after based on that year. Over time, my city at home grew unaffordable, to put it mildly. There's no hope of me ever owning a house in the neighborhood I grew up in. Life also happened. I finished university, unsuccessfully tried to change careers, major fail, etc. A few years ago, one of my old friends from my exchange year was traveling across Canada and stayed with me for a few days, in May to June-ish. She let me know that she'd be leaving her house share around September, so there was a golden opportunity if I wanted it. The click moment was on the bus after a really bad day at work. I realized it wouldn't get better where I was. All I could think about was the last place I was where I was happiest/most myself, if that makes sense. So I emailed my buddy to ask her about the room. It was the scariest email of my life. Coming up on 2 years here, and it's been one good thing after another. I'm catching up on all the things adults have. I recently signed a contract for a management gig with an amazing salary. I have retirement savings for the first time ever. Citizenship papers and a house are next. Yeah, I've made plenty of newbie mistakes, but Belgium's been very nice to me, and I owe a lot to this place. ITT, rich people who travel. ITT, moved from the US/Europe to a poor country for a few years. Finding a job was hard, but I had passive income from back home and the equivalent of 3 years' salary in savings for the local country. I'm super happy now. Or, I'm having the time of my life going to college in a foreign country. Nice description of my ex. I can live here forever doing nothing because my 1 year savings from my scholarship are worth your lifetime savings in local currency. Yeah, babe, trust me, I know. Determination. Pure stubborn determination. My husband and I wanted out of Russia and we couldn't go back home, war, so we sold everything we had and my husband went to the UAE to find a job. My daughter and I moved in with my in-laws and a year and 10 months later we joined him. What helped make the first step was saving that my husband lived off of and family willing to take us in. We are planning to move again in a few years because we don't want to live here in the long term either. I've lived in several countries. They aren't necessarily better than my home country. I'm from Switzerland, but it was a good decision and enriched my life and career in many ways. I've lived in Peru, Bangladesh, Bolivia and Albania so far. I make good money, have a very good savings rate cause it's cheap. My career has progressed with my increased global experience. I'm doing very well. More importantly, I have seen the world, experienced different cultures, learned languages, met different people, made friends, grown as a person and learned about myself. How? I took an internship with an international NGO, even though I had already started a career and was nearly 30. Worked for Siemens and started a company with a buddy before that. It meant a huge pay cut, but it didn't matter for a young single heading to Peru. Now I live a great life, have an interesting job and friends all over. Switzerland is an amazingly good place to live. but for me this was the right move. I sometimes think about when is the right time to go back, but for now I'm staying on this path. What do you do for work? Smile. 3 steps: spin the globe/map around, poke finger at globe/map while blindfolded, move to place your finger landed on, works every time. Poke Pacific Ocean. Well, that water's not getting any wetter. /packs suitcase. In Japan, heart surgeon. Number 1. Steady hand. One day, Yakuza boss need new heart. I do operation. But, mistake. Yakuza boss die. Yakuza very mad. I hide in fishing boat, come to America. No English, no food, no money. Daryl give me job. Now I have house, American car, and new woman. Daryl save life. My big secret, I kill Yakuza boss on purpose. I good surgeon. The best. I moved to the UK for university when I was 18. I had a long distance, started as online, boyfriend and an alcoholic mom, and I just needed out. I had spent time overseas before because my family lives in Taiwan, so I was already fairly used to functioning independently in a foreign country. I think this was important. My friends who had never left their country before moving abroad had a lot of issues that I never had. Simple stuff like navigating public transport, finding doctors, etc. An unfortunate reality is that mental health problems and abuse exist everywhere on earth. My boyfriend turned out to be abusive, and I barely scraped through university because of that and other trauma. If I would have been in a better mental place and relationship, I could have really excelled and I would probably still be in Europe today. After I graduated uni, I puttered around other parts of Europe before eventually moving back to the States, not the same place I grew up, and I now have a good career and friends and a home. I still have the itch to be abroad though, and I think I will eventually end up back in Europe somehow. My advice to anyone is get your mind sorted and protect yourself before you move abroad, especially if you're alone. Being depressed and stuck in your room is the same as anywhere else, and you can really burn yourself out if you're also in a foreign place. Wow, I'm glad everything turned out well for you. I ditched the USA for Taiwan 5 years ago. The best advice I can give you is to find friends that enjoy your hobbies as soon as possible. I also did Skype interviews and lined up a job before I moved. I meet a lot of people that don't do that. Even if you are not into outdoor activities, I highly suggest you do a few small hikes/walks when you first arrive. It helps people feel connected to their new place. I do my best to bring newcomers to the island on a motorcycle ride down the Eastern Coast Highway, up a small mountain, or along a river. Even if they never join me on an outdoor adventure again, they bring up the trip often when seeing them again. What do you do in Taiwan? I stayed there over the summers as a kid/teen, and I've always had a little itch to live there as an adult, but I'm not sure teaching is for me. I teach kindergarten in the morning, but I have friends from many professions. Whatever you're interested in, I'm sure you could do it in Taiwan. I'm from the US. I live in Germany. I did an intra-company transfer. It's really, really nice here. I've been able to do so much traveling and see so many different things in different cities. I think of all the Americans who live their lives basically never leaving the country, or at most maybe spending a week in Paris as a once-in-a-lifetime trip, and I just can't help but think of how much they're missing out on. I've seen so much different art and architecture, hiked through landscapes with breathtaking views of castles in the distance, had new foods, and, sort of, learned a new language. I feel like I've seen so much, and I know that I've barely scratched the surface. I've got dozens of cities and places that I want to see, and I'm sure many more that I don't even know about that I will find out about and go to. And it's weird to me, because if you told me 10 years ago that I'd be living this life, I wouldn't have believed you. Not because it would have been impossible, but because I don't think I would have wanted it. But here I am, and it's been great. Haven't noticed teaching English as a response. In many countries, a TEFL certificate will suffice in getting a job as an English teacher until you can network and feel out the market for a more suitable job. Been in the Czech Republic for 7 years now. TEFL certs can sometimes be obtained in the foreign country of choice, but can most certainly be done first in the USA before choosing a country and can be obtained for a reasonable price. Married a Swiss girl and a few years later relocated to Switzerland. We're sort of half in the large English-speaking international/expat community and half, or maybe a bit more, in the French-speaking local community, whereas lots of people here never really seem to connect with the locals in any way. If you want to make connections, join clubs or communities such as sports teams, get involved in doing things with people outside of work, and don't limit yourself to who you spend time with. Learn the local languages, even if you have to endure people laughing at your attempts. Laugh with them. You're probably gonna be awful to start with. My early attempts were pitiful, but after a while the shame of not being able to speak or understand French, when most people could possibly speak at least some English, wore off and the pride of being able to communicate in another language took over. Greater than my early attempts were pitiful, but after a while the shame of not being able to speak or understand French wore off and the pride of being able to communicate on another language took over. As someone learning a new language, I really needed to hear that. Thanks you/fucking cunt I bollocks. It gets way easier a lot quicker than you may think at the start amid the frustration. Keep persevering and try and speak it as often as possible, even with people that can speak English, non-native speakers at least. I always try to speak French to continue to practice. Don't be afraid to ask questions or for explanations either. I moved to USA, so much food in grocery store. Never see so much food. Mangoes, peppers, so much. I cry for my family who die of starvation. I have my own family, job, car, and my son graduate college. From Bangladesh 1971 genocide. I survive. Greater than how did you make it? Applied for a job in the USA. They offered a relocation package and help with the visa stuff. I highly recommend both if you do it. Greater than what helped you to make a first step? Apart from a good education, sadly, the death of a friend reminded me life is short and fleeting, and that I should live it. He and I were very similar, and he died from cancer. Another friend told me of a job that perfectly matched my degrees and talents, referred me, and here I am in the USA. I'd absolutely do it again. It was a life-enriching process. Probably the worst part is the loneliness. My nearest family is 10+ time zones away. Before I moved, my family would have dinner together on Thursdays and I helped my sister on the weekends. I make do with FaceTime calls, but I have a niece and nephew I've only seen 3 times since they were born. The loneliness and missing time with them is by far the hardest part. I want out. It depends on your standards for a better country. I studied abroad in uni and took language classes. When I graduated, I couldn't find a job with a livable salary in the US, so I got my TOEFL and decided to just beef up my resume with a year or 2 of in-country experience. Went to the country on the offer of a job, which was filled by the time I got there. I hit the pavement and found a job by the end of that week teaching. I lived there for 5 years, and met the husband working at an international school. We then moved to Asia for a promotion for him. After a few years of living without some typical Western conveniences like hot water in the kitchen, we could afford to buy a place in Europe. As others have said, lots of crappy jobs, but in the end it was well worth it. Great story. And thanks for sharing r/I want out, never heard of it before. Moved to Greece from the UK, then around Europe for a year. I moved to Australia eventually. What a fantastic place. I have not regretted it once in 25 years. I have retrained for new careers here twice, both times I was given assistance by the government. I have bought properties, rented and built properties here. Australia is a country that rewards hard work and is willing to invest in you. First of all, it is hard to define better. Better is different for everyone. Relocating to Europe from the US was better for me, but for some it would be the opposite. The first step was that I participated in a study abroad program and was overseas for a year. While there, I met a woman, we fell in love, etc. So I moved with her to her country. How I made it? I had enough money saved to live on for 6 to 8 months, so I wasn't under immediate pressure to find work. I spent the first 6 months looking for work and learning the language as intensely as possible. After about 6 months I found a job. It was shitty, but it allowed me to pay the rent. With the security of having work, I continued learning the language as much as I could and looking for new work. After about a year I felt pretty fluent and the rest progressed largely as it would have had I stayed in the US. Work at a shitty job for a while, get some experience, find a new job, and repeat. Sounds like an awesome life experience to me. Mind sharing what country? I am a Hong Konger and clicked this thread for inspiration. Then I immediately realized that what I want is my city to be better, instead of moving to anywhere else. I really hope you get what you want. But have a backup plan. China could do to you guys what they did to Tibet. Have an exit strategy, and stay safe. I moved to Cambodia and lived there a while before finding my home in northern Thailand. I got lucky that a job opened up in my dream town and that I had the previous experience working in a foreign country and with students who spoke very little/no English. My first step was leaving college and having no work in the US. I lived in Seattle and worked in a restaurant, and while I loved it I wanted more. Taking the step to move to Cambodia, to get a TEFL and then work through many difficult but rewarding situations made me realize that life back home wasn't really meant for me. If you have the desire to move away from home, it's very doable. C is a great place to explore and settle for a while, but so is Aus/NZ because they allow people from the US work permits until they're 30, and those from Canada can work anytime because they are all Commonwealth nations. Hope this info was okay. If anyone has any questions, send me a PM and I'd be happy to go more in depth in my process. From the UK and went to university in South Africa and then came back and moved to Berlin. Frustration and being fed up was the first step, and working jobs you never thought you'd do. Getting out your comfort zone and being open-minded was the rest. Now I'm engaged and been with the same company for 2 years. Brexit is probably gonna fuck me though. Met, married and moved over with an Australian from the States, and it's been an insanely challenging, exciting, eye-opening and rewarding 5 years so far. I did it for a girl. Then we broke up. Now I like it here. I made it by being an English teacher. There's a lot of demand for it and it pays well. An English teacher. Come on. He no grammar good for be English learner.